3, 2, 1. All right. So where did we leave off? Wental, help me out. When's the last thing we did? Wental, are you there?
Oh yeah, I have the Gondar mutiny for the last thing.
Okay, so we did Ghadar mutiny, the Ghadar mutiny. All right, Mike, help us out. What is the Ghadar mutiny?
It was when like diaspora Indian or Punjabi diaspora from like who moved to other countries, they planned something, and then
They planned a big barbecue.
yeah, and then the six in Punjab who weren't actually involved with it got blamed, and then that's what I remember.
Okay, that's kind of true, right? Let's flesh it out a little bit. All right, so we're dealing with Punjabis, and we're dealing with the Punjabi diaspora. Ilha, do you know what cities the Punjabi diaspora are living in?
I'm not sure.
Oh no. All right, Tiffany, help him out.
I think I remember you saying like Canada and Belgium and.
Okay, Canada. Yeah. Right, not a city, but yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay, so we're a little bit shaky on this. The Ghadar mutiny. I think this was. Oh, my bell had just rung, didn't it? Is this where we were leaving it off? Okay. Anyway, all right. So the Ghadar mutiny is it's organized by the Punjabi diaspora, and it's primarily in San Francisco. Okay, but it also spreads into Vancouver, Canada, and also into Berlin, Germany. Okay, so and like this is like the flag of the Ghadar political party in San Francisco, right? They like had candidates, they were like lobbying, trying to get laws and stuff, and they're trying to plan this mutiny. Yash, what is the mutiny that they're trying to plan?
Well, they were trying to rise against the British during like the war, while the war was going on, and they hoped that it would spread, but it ended up not because the British undermined the operation, I guess.
Yeah, that's totally. Oh, whoops. That's totally true. Yeah, the British infiltrated the operation, arrested a whole bunch of the Punjabis in Canada, right? And then went into Punjab and arrested a bunch of the Punjabis in Punjab as well. Now, Mike mentioned that it was primarily Hindus starting the Ghadar mutiny and starting this movement, right? But the Sikhs get kind of rounded up into this, okay? I think this is where we left off. Did we get the... did we talk about the, we did the Rowlatt Act and the Defense of India Act, right? Yes, okay. Did we, did you guys meet Gandhi? No? All right, let's better know a Gandhi. All right, so big number G, is it should be G? It should be G. G for Gandhi. I don't know what number it is. What number are we on, guys? Drew, what are we on, man?
I think we are on G.
Okay, let's go with G. G for Gandhi. All right. So Gandhi, we knew that this dude was coming. We knew it was coming along. So he is arriving back into India during World War I. Okay. He had been previously living in South Africa. He's born in India, right? Grew up in India, but he moved to South Africa for work. And he had been living in South Africa, advocating for Indian rights in South Africa, right? And he worked in the ambulance corps and stuff. He had started his Satyagraha movement in South Africa, and his movement was a Indian-based movement, right? He was trying to, excuse me, he was trying to advocate for Indians in South Africa. He was unfortunately quite quiet about blacks in South Africa. He was not advocating for black rights, not very much, very little. But his actions in South Africa have started to give him some like celebrity, right? And Indians back home who are receiving news back and forth they're hearing about him. And so by the time we get to 1915, the movement back home has gained enough speed that Gandhi comes home to join the movement. Okay. Part one is he wants to be part of a movement to save his homeland, right? Part two is he had also made himself quite the enemy of the Afrikaners, and that the Afrikaners were, going to start arresting him and maybe worse, right? I know that if I were a person of color, I would not want to end up in an Afrikaner prison, right? That seems like a pretty bad place to be. So he comes to India and he joins the movement. He is immediately allied with Gokal, and Gokal kind of plugs him in to the movement, but very quickly Gandhi is going to meet everyone else. All right, let's get a note on his name here. I know Yash and Drew, you guys know this already, but I'm going to help everyone out here. His name is Mohandas. Okay, his first name is Mohandas, last name is Gandhi. Mahatma, you're going to hear him called Mahatma all the time, right? All the time, like frequently. They call him Mahatma, right? Yash, you know what Mahatma means?
Isn't it like a term, almost like religious term for someone who's like a closer to God, I guess?
Yeah,
Like
Drew?
Doesn't it just mean a loving person or like a sage?
Yeah, I had always translated it as like the great one, right? Like the great one. And it does have this like religious honor, this religious undertone, right? Like somebody closer to God, like a great one closer to God. Anyway, it's an honorific term that gets used as like a nickname. And they oftentimes will say Mahatma Gandhi says this, Mahatma Gandhi says that, Mahatma Gandhi did this, Mahatma Gandhi did that, right? And they use it like a first name. And so a lot of time Americans think Mahatma is his first name, but it's not. Okay, I just don't want you guys to get confused if you read it in an article or something. Mohandas Gandhi and Mahatma Gandhi are the same person. Are we good? I don't want you to get too confused by that. All right. So here's his wife, Katsurbai. Katsurbai is going to be a member of the resistance as well. She's going to be one of the more important women involved in the resistance. Gandhi is going to bring with us, we already have Swaraj, we already have Swadeshi, and so now Gandhi's going to bring us our third S, Satyagraha. Satyagraha. Satyagraha is a word that you need to be able to say, you need to be able to spell, you need to be able to use. Satyagraha. Okay? All right. So Satyagraha literally translates into holding on to truth. Holding on to truth. Okay? And it's Gandhi's primary philosophical idea, and it's the idea that you need to it's the idea that you have to have nonviolent resistance. Nonviolent resistance. Okay? Don't call it passive resistance. This is a phrase that Gandhi would actually like counsel people not to use the word passive resistance. Passive resistance implies that you're not doing anything. Okay? That's not correct. This is nonviolent resistance. So it's going to be strikes. It's going to be boycotts. It's going to be parades. It's going to be protests. It's going to be blocking the roads. It's going to be refusing to pay taxes, refusing to obey laws, refusing to recognize the authority of police, right? It's active. It's an active concept, and it's a concept where he's going out and doing all these things all the time, okay? But it's always nonviolent. Now, Gandhi is not the first person to invent nonviolence, of course, right? This is an old Hindu idea, ahimsa. Ahimsa. Drew, if you want to help us out with ahimsa? Drew?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. All right, I'm not going to ask Yash because Yash already told me he doesn't know anything about Hinduism, right? So we're going to skip. Drew usually has the answers. Drew, you remember it?
I think it's like a concept in Hinduism, which is like it's like respect for all living things without violence for anyone else.
Yeah.
Or like.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, Drew. So Ahimsa is an ancient Hindu idea, and it's the idea of nonviolence or doing no harm. That you respect everything, you respect everybody by doing no harm, by avoiding harm and nonviolence. Ahimsa is one of the reasons why so many Hindus are vegetarians, right? About a third of India is vegetarian, the highest proportion of vegetarians on the planet. Well, this is why, right? Ahimsa extends not just to people, but to animals and life as well, right? Gandhi's taking this ancient Hindu idea and turning it into a resistance movement. Okay. And Gandhi is a Hindu himself. Obviously, he's a very religious, spiritual Hindu himself, but he's also talking to primarily a Hindu audience. So he's plugged into something that they already know. One of the things that's interesting here is that Ahimsa and Satyagraha are viewed as a weapon of the strong. People will oftentimes interview Gandhi and they ask him about how the Indians are so weak. What are the Indians going to do against the British, the army, the mighty British army, the strong navy, the strong army, what are they going to do? And Gandhi says they are the weak because they can't solve their problems without a gun. Right? We are the strong because we can solve our problems. We can make it work. We can bring about the change in the world, and we can do it the hard way by not picking up a gun. Okay? This is pretty interesting stuff, right? Because he is tapping into this idea of the truth. Tapping into this idea of the truth. Now, it may be weird, right? Holding on to the truth, that's the actual translation of Satyagraha, like to hold on to the truth or to embrace the truth, right? And truth may seem strange here, right? But what Gandhi says is that only through Satyagraha do you recognize the truth of the individual. The truth is that the British are the barbarians, the British are the beasts, the British are the animals. And that when we stand up to the British, we meaning India, when we stand up to the British reveal themselves to be the barbaric beasts that they are because they attack us, right? And that he says that the underlying truth is that the Indian people are noble and the Indian people are strong and that the Indian people should be ruling themselves. That's the truth. The lie is what the British use to keep the Indians down. Right? So we're getting into this like philosophy stuff, right? Gandhi writes a lot of philosophy. He writes like dozens of books about philosophy. Okay, so this isn't just Mr. Veenstra going into like Philosophy Town, right? Though I do like Philosophy Town, though it's pretty sad, I would say. But this is Gandhi doing this. Okay, let's get back to the Sikhs real quick, and then we're going to be done. Okay, let's go back to the Sikhs. This is going to be one of these agitating events that is going to really kick the movement into overdrive. It's called the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. Jallianwala Bagh, dang it, I was saying it perfectly in class today. Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. Most of the time, white people say the Amritsar Massacre. Okay, let's get some words here out of the way. Amritsar is the name of the city in Punjab. Amritsar is the capital. Well, at this point in time, it's the capital of Punjab. Today, it's not the capital, but back then it was. Amritsar is the main city in Punjab. Okay, it's also the holy city for Sikhs. The holy city for Sikhism. Okay. Jallianwala Bagh is the name of a square in that city. Okay, it's the name of the square in that city. If you're going to say Amritsar Massacre, you need to say Amritsar Massacre 1919 because unfortunately there's multiple Amritsar massacres. Unfortunately. Okay, so that's why the best name is Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, right? But that's a hard word to say. We're cool on names? We got it? We're good? Okay. Thank you for giving me a thumbs up, Tiffany. All right. This is in the reaction to the Rowlatt Act. Under the Rowlatt Act, all civil disobedience is illegal. All nationalist movements are illegal, right? The British are cracking down on Punjab, and they're cracking down on Punjab because the Hindus had started this kind of movement in Punjab, and the Sikhs were not really participating up until this point, but the British are cracking down on the Sikhs anyway. Okay. Now, Indians, of course, will recognize that a Sikh and a Hindu and a Muslim are different people, right? They're very, very different people. That conflict is a very, very different thing. But the Brits don't care. The Brits say, you're all just a bunch of dirty Indians to me, right? We're dealing with some old school racism here, right? It's kind of like people who tell you that all Latinos are Mexican, right? Or all Asians are Chinese, right? Something like that. Like I knew a dude, he's like, yeah, we're gonna go get some Chinese. And I was like, this is a sushi restaurant. He's like, yeah, Chinese. And I go, no, dude, sushi's Japanese. He's like, yeah, that's what I said, it's Chinese. And I was like, okay, right? Yeah, so this is that old school racism. An Indian is an Indian is an Indian, right? Of course, Indians don't see it this way. Indians see the difference, right? We're good? Okay. There's a series of protests that are happening in April of 1919. And in the beginning of April of 1919, one of these protests turns into violence. It's outside of the governor's mansion, and the governor takes a shot into the crowd. He has his guards shoot into the crowd, just a couple of shots, right? But he shoots them into the crowd, and the Sikhs are upset about this. The Sikhs are like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you oppressing us? And second, why are you shooting into us? We're the veterans trying to save you. We're the loyal soldiers in World War I. We're the ones who've been your backing in this whole time, right? The Sikhs are starting to turn on the Brits. And so the Sikhs start to blow things up. They start to blow up train tracks and radio lines, radio towers and telephone lines. They start cutting the lines. There's a couple of instances where they don't actually blow up the train tracks because they don't want to attract the cops. They just disassemble the train tracks. They get a whole bunch of people out in the middle of nowhere in the forest, and they like pull the spikes up out of the ground and pick up the rails and just carry the rails off into the forest. You just disassemble. So the security never hears an explosion, but the train comes around the next morning and the tracks are just missing. The tracks just aren't there anymore, right? And so the Sikhs start doing this. In fact, we're going to get a situation where the Sikhs are going to do hundreds and hundreds of acts of terrorism within the course of a month. Over the course of a month. I think we're going to get something like 300 acts of terrorism in a month. Now, kind of like the beginning of Umkhonto we Sizwe, the Sikhs are being careful not to kill people. They don't want to hurt people, but they definitely want to send a message to the Brits, right? So they're doing stuff like, train tracks and stuff like that, okay? Later in the same month, we're going to get a problem with Marcella Sherwood. Marcella Sherwood is a white woman. She's a school teacher, and she's in Amritsar. And she is teaching a bunch of little white kids, and there's a bunch of protests, and some of these protests have been turning into riots. People have been getting hurt at them, right? And she's concerned that one of the protests near her school is going to get out of control. And so she decides to take all the kids and leave the school and then take them to their homes where they can be safe. Right, so she's leading a group of like 24 kids through these like back alleyways, trying to avoid the crowds and stuff to get her way over to where they can be safe. She's confronted by a group of Sikhs, a group of Sikh men, and the Sikh men start to attack her. They start to assault her. Okay, she orders the kids to run away, and the kids all run away. Right, but the Sikh men are coming after her, and they're going to assault her. It looks like she's going to be gang raped and maybe worse. Another group of Sikh men show up and defend her. The other Sikh men say, no, this isn't what we are. We don't attack the helpless, we defend the helpless, right? So the Sikh men actually fight with each other. The two groups of the Sikhs fight with each other, and she gets away with no injuries. I think she has some minor bruises, right? But she gets away with no injuries, and these Sikh men fight with each other. Now, the governor, the British governor, he looks at this incident and he enacts a new policy. Let's go. Who haven't we heard from? Tiffany, can you read our good quote here?
Sorry, there's like a lot of background noise right now.
All right, Tiff, go ahead and mute yourself. We'll have Yosh do it.
Some Indians crawl face downwards in front of their gods. I wanted them to know that a British woman is as sacred as a Hindu god, and therefore they have to crawl in front of her too.
All right. So what he's referring to is the way that Hindus pray, okay? And that Hindus will have like a little, oftentimes will have like a little shrine like in front of the house or like on the street, right? And they put the powder and flowers and stuff on it. They're on their knees and they pray and they go down and stuff, right? Okay, so Hindus pray like that often, okay? You know who doesn't pray like that? Sikhs, okay? Sikhs don't pray like that, right? But this is a good example. This is a good example of him. I don't see Sikh in here at all, right? There's a lot of evidence that the British didn't even really recognize Sikhism as a separate religion. A lot of them just thought that Sikhism was just a type of Hinduism, right? And so they're just one dirty Indian's another dirty Indian, right? They're putting them all together. He makes it a law that all Indians have to crawl on their belly in front of all British offices. And so here's a picture of the British soldiers making a Sikh man crawl on his belly down the street as he passes the British offices. Okay, this is the height of insulting, of course. Even though Hindus do pray on the ground, that's still insulting to Hindus too, right? I mean, the whole point is for it to be insulting. That's the point, right? That's the whole point. Well, it's going to get worse. Because by the end of the month is the holy day for the Sikhs. And the Sikhs are going to have a festival. They're going to have a festival in Jallianwala Bagh, the square, okay? They get together and, you know, just like any other religious festival, they get together and they hold a big party and you got thousands of people together and people bring their food and there's dancing and there's music and, you know, it's a party, it's a festival, right? Here's the deal. Reginald Dyer, the governor here, the military commander, he believes that this party is going to increase nationalism. So he makes the holiday illegal. He makes the holiday illegal the day before the holiday. And he doesn't tell anyone. Okay, by British law, he has to publicly announce any changes in the laws so that everyone knows. And so what they do is they stand on the balcony of the governor's mansion and in a normal speaking voice say that the festival has been canceled to the whole city. He's speaking to the whole city, theoretically, right? So of course, nobody knows that it's canceled, right? And so they are gathering in this square. He then orders his men to lock the doors, the in and out of the square, to lock the doors. You have like these are big giant wooden doors, right? And you have like the wooden plank that you put onto it that holds the door closed, right? They lock the door from the outside, and he stations his men up in the top where they're up on like the second story, like the open air hallway up there and stuff, right? And he opens fire on the crowd. And he orders his men to fire specifically at the exits because that's where it'll be most dense. As people try to run away, they run for the exits. They can't get through the doors. And so there's this huge concentration of people there. They're firing into the concentration. In the middle of the square, there's something that today is called the Martyrs' Well. And it's a well in the middle where a bunch of people jump down in the well to try to escape the gunfire. And the British soldiers walk to the top of the well and just shoot everyone inside. Boom, 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 and just kill everyone inside. The official number is 1,000 dead. We know that this number is probably a lot more. Okay. You remember how bad when we talk about like the mass killings in the United States, right? What do you have to assume about the numbers in the United States? Mike, what do you always have to assume about those numbers?
You have to multiply them many times to get the true number.
Yeah, in the United States, generally speaking, you have to take the number times 2, generally speaking, sometimes worse, right? In India, you have to take the number times 3, right? India has a long, long history of faking these numbers, a long, long history of it. And you're going to see some of these ones. There's some of these things where it's like 10,000 people die, and the Indians are like, well, 100 people had a bad day. Right? You're like, what? All right. So we're probably looking at 2,000 or 3,000 dead is what we're probably looking at. Okay. From this point forward, the Sikhs are part of the resistance. The Sikhs will never be the allies of the British again, right? The Sikhs are part of the resistance. And this also is going to send a message to the rest of India. If England is willing to do this to its closest allies in the country, then what will England do to the rest? Right? Okay. Gandhi is going to start his non-cooperation campaign, and it's a campaign called non-cooperation. Okay, and this is where Indians everywhere have to not cooperate with the government, right? Not cooperate with the British. This is where Indians everywhere stop recognizing the court system, stop recognizing the laws, stop stop participating in the government, and most importantly, stop paying taxes, right? Hit them with a pocketbook. Okay, this is going to start massive, massive protests across the entire country. Okay, it's not just Bengal anymore. We're now getting protests in Bombay. We're getting them in Delhi. We're getting them in everywhere. We're getting them up and down the country. Okay, then we're going to get something called in 1922. We're getting the Charu Chara incident. The Charu Chara incident. So Charu Chara is in the state Uttar Pradesh. It's in the state Uttar Pradesh, which is like the most densely populated part of India. It's in like north center of India, north center. Okay, and it's the most densely populated area of India. This one state of India is like 100 million people or something like that. It's so many people. It's so many people. It's a state like the size of California, but it has like 100 million people plus. Okay. In one big protest, violence breaks out in this protest, and a bunch of the Hindus brought weapons, and the Hindus fire on some police officers, and they shoot on some of the British police officers. And so it's not a whole lot. It's only like 3 get shot, something like that. It's a pretty small number, right? But it causes this big backlash. Gandhi shuts the entire movement down because Gandhi doesn't want any Hindus, any Indians at all. He doesn't want any of them at all to bring weapons. In fact, he's going to go as far as to say, if the British hit you, you let them hit you. You fall down and let them hit you and then stand back up again, right? So Gandhi shuts down the whole movement because he feels like it's gotten too big. He can't control it, and he doesn't want it to turn into violence. But he's arrested anyway. The Brits arrest him. They sentence him to 6 years in prison. He ends up serving 2 years in prison. And what do every revolutionary do in prison? What does every revolutionary do in prison? Ilha, what does every revolutionary do in prison?
Write something like a book and like
You
print
write a
it out.
book. Hell yeah. Gandhi doesn't write a book. He writes 4 books, right? If there's one thing Gandhi knows how to do is starve himself. If there's 2 things Gandhi knows how to do, it's write a book and starve himself, right? He's really good at this stuff. By the time Gandhi dies, he will have written something like 40 books, right? He writes a lot of books, okay? We're going to give you these 2 things real quick, and then I'm done. So Khilafat is the Muslim movement that starts up at the same time, okay? The Muslims don't want to listen to Gandhi And so Jinnah starts up the Khilafat movement. Right? The Muslims don't want to listen to Gandhi, but the Muslims do want independence. Right? Again, if the Brits are willing to do this to the Sikhs, then what are they going to do to anyone else? Right? And so the Muslims do want to be part of this. The Muslims are protesting. They are marching in the streets. They are involved, but the Muslims are taking orders from Jinnah and the Islamic League, right? But at this point in time, Gandhi and Jinnah are friends. You guys remember Jinnah, right? Muhammad Jinnah? You're looking at me like you don't know who he is. Wentao, who's Jinnah?
I don't remember.
You guys are all looking at me like you don't know who Jinnah is. Right here. Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Okay, Mike, you remember him now?
He was the first big leader of the Muslim League, and
Mhm.
I guess he was the one who sort of got that separate Muslim country to be formed.
Yeah, he will eventually become the father of Pakistan. Okay, he will lead the independent Pakistan. At this point in time, he's not talking about an independent Pakistan. At this point in time, he's linked with Gandhi. They're friends. They're working together. Okay. At this point in time, they're going to split later, but right now they're working together. But the Muslims are taking Khilafat as the movement. It's the same movement. It's like a parallel movement. The other guy that we need to introduce you is this gentleman right here, looking pretty damn sexy in the bottom picture here, right? Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru. Jawaharlal Nehru. Okay, so Nehru is going to become, he will become the first prime minister of India. He will become the first prime minister of India. He's Gandhi's right-hand man. If we're drawing a parallel here, Nehru is going to be a lot like an A. Philip Randolph or a Bayard Rustin type figure. Okay, A. Philip Randolph or Bayard Rustin, you guys remember them? Okay, where Gandhi is like the big idea man. Gandhi is the guy coming up with all the big ideas. Nehru is the one who's making the ideas work. Okay, Nehru is a very, very skilled politician. One of the most skilled politicians in the whole century, right? One of the politicians of the century. I would say top 5 most skilled politicians in the century easily. Okay, and Nehru is immensely skilled at getting disparate groups to work together. He's really, really good at that. He's really good at organizing these groups. He's the reason why when they throw a protest, people show up. He's the reason why protests start to spread into all the other states. He's the reason why the protests are going into the non-Hindi speaking parts of India, right? He says, look, if we're going to have protests in Tamil Nadu, we need a Tamil speaker. If we're going to have protests in, Maharashtra, we need a Marathi speaker. If we're going to have, you know what I mean? Like he's getting people in the other languages. He's getting people in the other groups. He is really, really skilled at this. And in a lot of ways, Nehru is the leader of the movement, right? Gandhi is the leader, but here's the thing with Gandhi. Gandhi's going to spend a long time in jail. He gets arrested like 11 times. He gets thrown in jail for like a year and then he's back out for like 2 years. And he gets thrown in jail for a year and then he's back out for a couple of years, right? Gandhi's also kind of a weird dude. He's kind of weird. Okay. He's like a big hero. He's like, but he's kind of weird. He spends a lot of his time focusing on like personal spirituality and stuff, where he like goes through prolonged periods of time, like meditating and like looking at ancient scripts and all this other stuff, right? And while he's doing that, Nehru is the one who's keeping the movement moving. Does that make sense to you guys? Right? I don't want to diss on Gandhi. I mean, he's kind of weird, but I don't want to diss on him, right? I don't want Dhruv and Yasha's parents to come and murder me. But he's kind of a weird dude. He's kind of a weird dude, and he has these kind of periods where he kind of just checks out from the world because he's like trying to get spiritual enlightenment or something, you know. And then he like checks back in, and he's like, "Oh, how's the movement going?" Right? And Nehru's the one who keeps it moving. There's a reason why Nehru becomes the prime minister and not Gandhi, right? Because Nehru is the guy who knows how to get stuff done. Gandhi's the idea guy. Cool. All right. We're done with this, but I want to address there's an assignment that I want you to look at. If you're looking on Canvas, there's the assignment called Satyagraha all over. Okay, and it's this Google slide thing, right? This list here are all of the different Satyagrahas. There's two ways to use the word. One, you use the word as like the big idea of nonviolence, like, you know, ahimsa, nonviolence kind of stuff, right? There's that way to use the word. The other way to use the word is attached to one specific event. So if we had a Satyagraha protest in Salt Lake City, you would have the Salt Lake City Satyagraha. Does that make sense? You guys with me on the two ways to use the word? Okay. All right. So these are all different resistance movements. They're all connected together. They're all part of the anti-British pro-independence movement, right? But this is like Vaikom Satyagraha is going to be like in the place called Vaikom, this is the resistance, right? In the place called Bardoli, this is the resistance. The place of Goa, in the place of, you know, Aranya is you see what I mean? Most of them are a location, okay? Many of them are called Satyagraha, some of them are called something else. I want you to take 10 of these and profile them into the assignment, okay? Here's the reason why we're doing this. You need to be able to answer a series of kind of essay questions that are very, very likely to come up. And they're going to be questions where it's going to say something along the lines of, what economic impact did Satyagraha have? You need to say Satyagraha had this economic impact, and the example is whatever. You're going to pick one of these as your example, right? But there's going to be ones where it's going to say, what impact did Satyagraha have on women's rights, or on the rights of the family, or on tax law, or on economics, or on international business, or on whatever? You see what I'm saying? There's like 7 or 8 of those kinds of questions, and you need to be able to have some examples. The ones that I think are most important, I think the top 4 are really, really important. I would have everybody do the top 4, and then I would have everyone do these 3: non-cooperation, caliphate, and quit India. Okay, a lot of these other ones are kind of similar. They're kind of similar. Like I would pick those big ones. And then I would pick some of the other ones. You can do more for extra credit. Okay, I'm asking you to do 10. It's a 30-point assignment. That's 3 points per slide. Every additional slide you make is an additional 3 points. So you can walk away with 60 out of 30 if you do them all, if you want to. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but if you like are super into it and you got the time and the organization and you want to do it, then who am I to stop you? Cool? You're welcome to work with each other or work with people who are in person class. You're welcome to work with them, but the plagiarism check is on. So if you don't turn in the same file, if you turn in the same thing, it'll come back plagiarized and you both get zeros. Okay? But like if Mike does 2 of them and then reads them off to you guys, and then like Drew does 2 of them and reads them off to you guys, and you guys, write them in your own words, then that's awesome. Cool? Or you can do it on your own. It's your life. You live your life. All right. Do any of you guys have any other questions? Comments? Problems?
I have one more question. So I did my works cited already, but I wasn't
Yeah.
sure if I could turn it in. Okay, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, you can turn it in if you want. If you change it before the day, just turn it in again. It's not a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem. Anyone else? Going once, going twice? Mike.
Do we have a quiz?
Oh, yeah. I forgot. All right, here's your quiz. The code for the quiz is the national bird of India. What's the national bird of India?
Is it a peacock?
It is a peacock. Okay, the code is peacock. Thanks, Mike. I almost forgot. The code is peacock. Cool? Are we good to go? Anyone else going once, going twice? If you don't have any other questions, you're free to go.